Hello everyone, I'm Kostya, a 3D environment and technical artist for game, and today I showcase you BaseForPaint, a texture generator for Substance Painter that helps you generate a base within seconds. In the end of the video, you will be able to understand this tooling and how to use it. This video will be split into several parts. We will start with an overview of the tool, then we'll move on per layer explanation and tuning. Afterward, we'll see final tuning on the generated gradient, color attribution based on the gradient we've generated, use of those gradient into a mask or PBR value, and then we will conclude. BaseForPaint is already available for purchase on Gumroad. You will find the link in the description. Okay, so let's do an overview of this tool. Right now, I already have BaseForPaint imported in my project. And I do have here a simple mesh with baked map setup. So what I'm gonna do is to switch to Basecolor first and drag and drop this one to say, I want it to affect the base color. And as you can see, we already have a super nice gradient right here. So what it does is like basically compose with multiple map a gradient. So here up, I can see the generated gradient. And after this gradient is generated, it remap it to color. And we can tweak all those setup, all those layers. And most and foremost, we can see how each layer is influencing the final result. So for example, here the thickness is a bit weird, the curvature, etc, etc. So let's say I want to apply one of my presets that would be woody, okay? And I want to create another one really quickly. Basecolor, and this one, let's go for bluish gray, something like that. I do assume that this is too dark, so I can just remap the final gradient up to have something as I like. Maybe this is too bright, so up, I can just tweak that color, yeah, to be a bit more fading. And now I can just make sure that this appear only where I want it. And the job is done. I do have a base, while everything stay modular. So if, for example, here I feel the wood is too dark, I can go here and remap it to whatever I want. There you go. And I do assume it's a bit better like that. That's a nice base. But what we can try is to add PBR value to that. What we can do, super simple, in all fill layer, let's do, for example, a quick roughness pass. So let's add roughness channel. Let's drag and drop our BaseForPaint. Let's switch to roughness to see what we are doing. Okay. And so right now in the parameter, we can select the preset roughness as we want to invert the gradient. Right now I'm on the wood, so it'd be quite simple. I just want something that will be overall quite rough, maybe a less rough on the top. Yeah, that's fine. Now let's quickly do the roughness of the metal part, and afterward I will show you how to do the metallic. For the metallic, it's quite the same process. The only difference is that we will not invert the grayscale. I make sure that on the wood there is no metallic information, and I keep the metallic value quite tied up to not have too much variation on the same surface. Note that at this stage, the best is to check the PBR value directly with an integration in Engine. Now that we've seen an overview, let's see point by point each feature and how we can tweak it. So let's start again with Basecolor and our simple setup. So as you might have seen, we have presets here with default preset that I might add some other preset over time. We have here the debug view that will help us see each pass of the gradient and how it influences it. And then we have the layer. In the end of the layer, we have the color channel that is enabled only if you generate color on it. Now that we are good on that, let's see layer by layer how we can tweak everything. So let's start with the trickiest one, let's say, the AO base. The AO base is basically, let me show you, the map of ambient occlusion that is remapped to be a bit more in the mid value, so everything can be stacked up on top of that. So right now what we can see is that we can use a second AO. The second AO is here because personally on my workflow I like to, for props like that, bake an ambient occlusion that take in count flow. So to do that, unfortunately, maps aren't exposed here. What we can do instead is here, add generator, and onto the generator, say up, to generate the color. So here on that generator, here we do have the maps that are exposed here. And we can add our second ambient occlusion. So if I check here in my project up, I should have AO2. I can set it up for that layer, or your custom AO, or something you've painted, or an anchor point. That's the power of it. So right now that we have that, we can here go into AO base, go back into our view, and say that instead we want to use our custom ambient occlusion. Make sure to remap the value to stay in the mid gray. That will help for later on. And as you can see, this adds a lot of volume compared to the original one. Let's see for the Zenital value and the kind of base setup for other layer. You will see that on other layer we'll have nearly all the time an intensity slider and some remap value here. The intensity is such as in Photoshop, opacity value of how this layer is influencing the gradient. So if we tick that to be more or less important, we can see that the zenital value, so the kind of top-down lighting, change on our object. We can also remap the value. So for example, if I go into the zenital value, we can see here that we can change the low, mid and high values, such as a 3-point level, but also the remap of the resulting level. For example, I can change the bias to have something a bit more dark, but to have this kind of huge contrast. But to undarken everything, I can make sure the lowest value is at least 0.2, something like that. Yeah, and afterward, I can make sure that, yes, this is influencing as I want the rest of my gradient and my object. Also, on this particular setup for the zenital one, this is, as I said, kind of a top-down lighting. So right now it's used world space coordinate. They'll restore it as default, by the way. It uses world space coordinates, such as for now the y-axis. That is the up-axis in Substance Painter. We can use whatever axis we want if you want a custom setting, and we can for sure invert it if needed. Now that that is done, you might want a custom angle on your asset for this lighting. That's where you can, instead of use the world space coordinate, use a custom light setting. So, up, here we go. So here I do have now, such as a light generator in Substance Painter, that allow me to set up my custom angle as needed. It can be, for example, one light that will be there, up. And every other setting will be the same, but for that new use. So that's it for the zenital. Now let's see the gradient one. Now the gradient one. So for the gradient is, as you might see, gradient intensity and level, such as what we explained on the zenital one. What I will focus now on is how we can use the specific feature of each layer. So if we go to the gradient one, this is kind of a top-down basic gradient. So this one is based on world space coordinate, and here we can have whatever gradient we need, and we can invert it as needed. That's it for this one, but this one will be mostly used with remap value, so we can have really, as we want, tweaking the value to have, for example, huge intensity at the top and then a more faded way here. So that's how I will use it, and again you will have the gradient intensity that is here, so we can see how it impacts in the end our color. The thickness layer. The thickness layer is basically taking the thickness and doing the same as the rest. Let's debug it up to Zenital, thickness value. There we go. And so here we can change it into interpolated based on our needs. So right now we can see that the thickness is quite non-equivalent based on the size of the part of my asset. So that's where I might do some mask, for example, for the bolt and little ornament. But here I'll do an overall setup. So from default, let's say for this piece here, I want it to affect especially the corner, kind of being enhanced thickness if we want, enhanced curvature. Up. So here I can just grab whatever part I need, you see, as that. Change a bit the bias to fade a bit better. There we go, let's say I'm good with it. I can even make sure that it goes a bit more whitish. There we go. And so right now, if I go back to the default view and I change the intensity, we can see that it allows me to relight this part quite easily. So this one is just tweaking the level and make sure the intensity is properly set up. For the curvature here, the setup is a little bit different. Let's take a look at the curvature. Most of the time we tend to put a bit too much of curvature in our stylized creation. So right now here we have different setup to help reduce a bit all of that. One is a small intensity. As you can see on the final result, the curvature is not really visible, as if I increase it a lot, we can obviously see it. Up, restore as default. So what it does is, like in the curvature, we take the curvature, we blur it a little bit with this curve amount here, that allow us to have something a bit less sharp. So we can tweak the blur amount. And we also have the ability to remove the data from the ambient occlusion. For example, we can say that here it's more white because it was polished or worn due to damage, but here that's a bit less context to add those kind of detail. So I can increase how it fades based on the ambient occlusion to or just keep the value of the curvature that are exposed, kind of. So here I can say, yeah, I'm good with that, and I removed a lot of what will not be exposed to damage or other element of the life. So now if I go back here, I can change the intensity and we can see that, yeah, it's really highlights the part that can be worn or can be damaged by friction or whatever. And if we want to reduce the fade to show you the difference, it highlights inner parts that might not be interesting for us. Finally, after all this layer, what we have here is ambient occlusion. Some things that I should put emphasis on is, like, on each of those layers, don't hesitate to disable generate color so we can see directly how it impacts the source gradient and not the remapped colored one. So here, for example, I can already see how it affects the rest. And this is basically taking the AO and doing a custom level on it. So if we take a look at it, we can see that here we enhancing a lot the contact shadow, and we making sure that the more darkness stay in the first value, dark value of the contact shadow, and then this is softened. This is then applied to the rest of the gradient with some intensity as you need. That's it for the ambient occlusion, and we can see also the result of it directly on the remapped color. The remap layer is the final layer before passing all of that to the color function. This is really useful as it's kind of a level, a high level, if I may, to control everything that we've generated that will be affected by the gradient remap. So this is super useful, especially as we can have a base at work, some colors at work, and we just want some fine tuning. Most of the case, I will just open the remap panel and doing it here. So for example, here I can, just by changing the bias, changing how the light is impacted globally. We can also burn some color or darken everything if needed. And everything you can display it on the gradient directly, but most of the time for the remap, I like to see when it's we have the color on. This is also where you can invert the color, so we can create, for example, the roughness map or other kind of inner emissive fixed subsurface scattering effect. Last but not least, the color layer. This is where the magic happens, that transform our generic grayscale gradient to a colorful and vibrant base color. What will be really interesting compared to other methods is here we can have variation in terms of hue, saturation within our gradient. For example, we can add subtone, we can have a lot of life to our color directly within it. For example, we can say that, I don't know what kind of material is that, but I want the darkened color to be a bit more greenish because there is mosaic, there is oxidation or whatever you want. We can tweak just the final color, and as you can see, it already add a little bit of more interesting in what happened, because we came for something a bit more reddish to something a bit more greenish, and that's make things a bit more interesting than just a linear gradient of value over one single color. So here we could have some stuff interesting, but what is even better is like we can add more variations than just three color. You can go up to 5 color to create whatever pattern you like. So for example, let's see if I have some fancy, yeah. Here I do have a 5 color gradient. Let's change the remap so we can see a bit more. To have some brown subtone, but that end on some bluish ambient occlusion, if I may. We can still change everything, so we can see here for the more brown shadow to a bluish one, we can accentuate the bluish effect. There we go. We can also, for example, make sure that the brightness of that is a bit less intense. You can tweak basically everything, and everything you've done here react to what you've set up in your initial gradient. And that's the power of that tool. Is like, for example, we can say that, maybe I do want a bit more of a top-down gradient. I can go there and increase my top-down gradient. Maybe I want a bit more of the zenital value. I can go there and reduce the zenital impact of it. There you go. Maybe I want a bit more ambient occlusion. I can go there and increase the ambient occlusion. You got everything under one single slider, one single component. And that is really accessible and here built to, in the end, have a nice and rich color panel in your base color. Note that this generator is not only for base color or roughness or PBR. We can use it also for mask. For example, let's say you want to add a dirt mask or, I don't know, a fake bounce lighting from the ground. Let's add a fill layer in color and your ground might be red. Weird ground, but yeah, I don't mind. So let's add a mask, and on that mask we can add generator, for example, and we can add the BaseForPaint generator that we have. Let's debug our mask. Let's disable generate color. Here directly what we might want is, for example, to use the inverse, because we want something that face down. We want the same for the gradient, we want the inverse, so we have more emphasis on the down. We can now make sure that, yeah, we are a big emphasis here, and that it might clump up. Yeah, something like that. That's, we already feel that the ground is lighting up something. Okay. okay. Thickness, everything, might not touch that yet. AO, maybe reduce a bit the intensity. No, yeah, reduce a little bit. Here for the AO base, I'm using the classic AO and not the ground AO. Something could be interesting with a custom grain AO, for example. And let's say that I'm happy with my base. I can go back from here, and here I have something that is lit up from the bottom. That's super neat. Now that we've seen all the setup for the generated gradient and how to attribute color to it, let's see how we can generate properly some PBR value. To do so, I will go into my wood layer, add the roughness value, and here drag and drop the BaseForPaint. I then turn myself into the roughness view mode to make sure to see whatever happened. Here we can see that the values are a bit truncated. That's because there is a generate color enabled. No worries, there is a preset to start up with roughness setup. I can turn it on and it will automatically disable the generate color, but also invert the global gradient, so darker occlusion will not be shinier than exposed surface, for example. So now that we have a more coherent roughness base, we can just tweak the remap value range to fit our needs. So here for the wood, I want something that will be quite rough. So to do that, I will just change the mapping of the input, but I still do want a little bit of PBR value. So to gatekeep that, I'll just tweak the eye value as possible. Now let's do exactly the same for the metallic part. Note that we will still have control over all the layers that we've set up. For instance, here I do want the roughness to be less influenced by the zenital value. I can go to the zenital layer and tweak down its intensity to have something more proper here. We can do the same for instance on the gradient one. Here we go. I do have my base that is properly set up for the roughness. For the metallic, it's exactly the same without the invert on the gradient. Let's go to the wood layer, add a metallic influence, and here switch to metallic view mode. For the wood, we don't want metallic, so I will keep that at 0. For the metallic part, I do exactly the same. And here I drag and drop my generator. Now that I'm here, I can disable the generated color or directly apply the metallic preset. On the metallic preset now, I can make sure that we don't want the same material to be 1 in terms of metallic values, that will be fully metallic, and 0, that will make no metallic at all. This doesn't make really sense. So for this element that is a metal, I want to make sure that we keep variation, but we keep it on the metallic side of it. So I'll increase the low value, so we keep this variation, but there is no point where the metal is not metallic anymore. And that is that, I have a good base. On that stage of the texturing process, my recommendation will be to put the asset with the blocking maps directly within the engine with your current lighting and shader setup to see and adjust the PBR value as needed. But at least you have already a nice base and you're ready to go. To conclude, let's see all the BaseForPaint key features that we've seen today. Firstly, we can generate quality texture super quickly and with variety in the color palette, that is important. Secondly, we have the possibility to tune and fine-tune all parameters at each layer. To ease our workflow on that, we have also the debug view mode that allows to really see what happened at each pass of the generated gradient. The same generator can also be used to quickly create some PBR value, such as metalness, roughness. We have also the possibility to use another ambient occlusion map to change a bit the behavior of the base layer. We've seen also that we can use this generator as a mask, and we can add another noise or other variation on top of it. And finally, we have seen that there is some embed presets that help us kickstart super quickly that can be used for the blocking version of the asset, so it can be used within the engine for the level art or different other purposes. Alright, that's all. Hope you find it useful. The tool is available on Gumroad, link is in the description. It's also 25% off for the first 3 weeks following release. So now it's a good time to grab it. And if you do, don't hesitate to leave a review. It genuinely helps a lot. Have a good one and see you soon for more content and tutorials. Bye.